They Were the Last Resort, Part 7, by Hylian Hero 71. Alliance Research Station 01, Freedom's Triumph. Assignment, Project Last Resort.
"What in the name of the ancients is going on?"
shouted Lieutenant Ugilla, as the blast door to the safe room slid shut with a final hiss. The echoes of screams and gunfire could still be heard on the other side of the door, as the people inside caught their breath. Aside from Ugilla, there were only 2 other soldiers, along with a pair of scientists.
"The hybrids received a faulty wake-up signal. They've gone rogue,"
one of the scientists said, frantically working the communication terminal within the room. Ugilla had taken this deployment because she had thought it'd be low risk. Who would attack a facility no one knew existed? The very things they were creating, apparently.
"I've got communications with outside,"
the scientist reported.
"Oh. Ancients, save us,"
they said in fear.
What's going on?"
Ugilla asked angrily, her and her soldiers keeping the weapons trained on the door. The gunfire and screams had drawn away, but the muffled sound of footsteps was just on the other side.
"That unauthorized signal wasn't just received by us. Nearly every single facility working on the Last Resort project has activated, and the hybrids have gone rogue. We're attempting to use the pathogen implants, but the activation sequence has been disabled somehow."
"How many facilities have activated?" Ugilla asked, starting to understand the fright in the scientist's voice.
"Several dozen. The program was to have a facility on every inhabited planet in the Alliance, for protection. Now there are armies of angry hybrids on half of the core planets.
We can't afford to worry about that right now. How are we supposed to get out of here?"
Ugilla asked, as the unmistakable sound of a cutting torch sounded from the other side of the door. The scientist could offer no help. March 25, 2034, 3:46 a.m. Sol Systems, UHS, Stern Resolve. As the ship shuddered from yet another hit, Logan took stock of the situation. As soon as the defensive positions had been taken, every ship in the fleet with a MAC cannon to point at the foes began firing, computers calculating the exact position to fire to ensure a hit, even accounting for evasive maneuvers. It was only 30 minutes since the enemy had opened fire on the forces furthest from Earth. They'd fallen back to the rest of the fleet quickly, but had done a significant amount of damage before doing so. Once the enemy closed to the main part of the fleet, that's when it really hit the fan. Even if the fleet engaging him was larger, Logan noted that they made up for that with uncooperativeness. The Alliance and New Order clearly weren't fond of working together, and it showed in how sloppily the 2 forces arrayed themselves. Hell, Logan was pretty sure he'd seen them take potshots at the other a few times. Regardless, things were bad. The human forces were giving far better than they got, but there were so many enemy ships that they'd been pressed all the way back to Earth orbit.
"Move to cover the civilian ships,"
he ordered, trying to ensure that even if they were fighting, the civilian ships took as little damage as possible. The ship rocked so hard that Logan was thrown from his seat as a torpedo struck.
"Damage report,"
he shouted, as everyone scrambled back to their feet.
"Engineering reports engines operable at only 20%. Weapons similarly affected. Sickbay reports casualties from all decks,"
a nearby officer answered. The Resolve had taken an extremely dangerous position to better cover the civilians, and was getting hammered for it.
"Direct all available power to the weapons,"
Logan ordered, as the ship rocked again.
"I want this thing to keep firing for as long as possible."
The fleet facing down the humans was larger, and theoretically better armed, and yet they struggled to break this meager force of ships blocking them from reaching their goal. Time and time again, forces moved forward, intent on breaking through the human line. Each time the force had been destroyed before reaching their target. They were losing more ships and men, but each time a human ship was destroyed in a flash of fire and light, that could not be replaced, and that was happening to more and more by the minute. The Alliance Dreadnought was the center of their line, firing shot after shot from its many armaments into the human forces. The Resolve had placed itself between it and the civilian craft, hoping to be a juicier target.
"Sir, we've lost 3 more ships. That makes nearly 26,
an officer shouted, as the ship rocked yet again, and Logan began to wonder how long the Resolve could hold together.
"We have to hold until the ships from Parker arrive,"
he said, mostly to himself. As the ship took yet another hit, one of the power conduits in the wall exploded, killing several nearby officers.
"Sir, the ship is coming apart,"
the first officer reported, as another heavy hit was taken, causing the primary lighting to go offline, leaving a dim red glow to light the room. Logan sighed. This was the one thing he had hoped he would never have to order. He pressed the intercom switch and spoke. This is the Admiral to all hands. Abandon ship. The bridge crew began to evacuate, everyone losing the rest in the dark until only Logan remained on the bridge. That order includes you, my friend, said Krytek, who had stayed behind. Not this time, Logan said, running to the helm. I am going to keep this ship going until it's just a pile of scrap. You need to leave. I'm not under your command. You can't make me leave, Krytek said, taking a position at the weapons control station. Then let's get him, Captain, Logan said, turning the ship to face the enemy dreadnought and engaging all remaining engines. It would take a few minutes to reach at this speed. Let's make them bleed for this. The ship limped out from the human lines, its blackened hull barely leaving its name legible as escape pods finished launching from the barely operable hulk. For a moment, the enemy fleet ignored them, thinking the ship was abandoned and drifting. But then the main cannon fired, and fired again. As the ship continued toward the enemy force, what seemed like every gun in the enemy fleet was turned on it, bathing the already blackened hull in plasma fire. Damn, they really want us dead, Krytek said, working on the cannons with an impressive efficiency. Impressive that the ship could take such a beating. Though, I suppose, it was made by humans. It's a good thing. They really don't want us to reach that dreadnought, Logan shouted, as more energy conduits detonated. The fact either of them were alive was by pure chance. Logan felt as if he'd been punched hard in the gut, but it wasn't until he heard the hiss that he looked. Pieces of shrapnel had cut across his body. Red blood was dripping into the floor. More importantly, his suit had been cut open in several places. Logan! Watch your suit! Krytek shouted. It's fine. They might destroy us, but there's no way in hell I'm going to die of an infection in battle. He answered, punching in orders to the engines. The drive core still had enough juice for one more jump to FTL, and they were close enough to the dreadnought to ensure a hit. He felt Krytek's hand on his shoulder. It's time to go, he said. The computer can execute the jump. Logan nodded, plotting the jump with a delay of a few minutes. With Krytek's help, he limped out of the bridge, heading for the nearest escape pod bay. One had been left for him. When they finally reached the pod, it felt like the ship would come apart at any moment. Fires raged unchecked, and smoke filled the corridors. Krytek sat him into one of the seats, before stepping back out into the corridor. Where are you going? Logan shouted, as the pod secured him to his seat. We both know the autopilot won't survive to execute the jump, Krytek explained, placing a few orders into the pod's control panel. Someone's got to activate it. Don't lie. You plan to make me leave and stay yourself. Then I will. You should be in here, he shouted, struggling against the pod's restraint. No can do, old friend. If it wasn't for you, I'd have died all those years ago in that shuttle crash. I hope the force that tried to genocide your entire species. At least in this way, I can put things right. Enough humans have died today. Go back to your wife and kid, Krytek shouted, as the pod door sealed itself shut, and the pod was shot into space. Logan watched out the window, helpless to change anything when the few operable engines aboard the Resolve fired one last time, the ship blinking into FTL. There was a great blinding flash, and when it dissipated, there was nothing left of the enemy dreadnought but wreckage. No, Logan said, losing consciousness from his wound. 12 hours later. Logan was sure he was dead. How could he not be? Back when he'd first been put in the suit, the doctor had told him that a single breach could take his life, and he'd just taken a fair few more than that. But if he was dead, why could he feel himself slowly breathing? Why did his body hurt so much? He forced his eyes open, only to be blinded by the lights around him. A nurse was standing over him. Where am I? He asked. You're in a sickbay aboard New Eden, the nurse answered. You gave us quite a scare, Admiral. We weren't sure if you'll pull through after such an exposure. What happened? He asked, sitting up in his bed despite the pain from his body. His suit had been repaired. I think you can learn that later on, the nurse said with a smile. For now, there's some people that want to see you. The nurse opened the door, and James ran inside, closely followed by his mother. Dad! Dad! I saw Earth! James shouted excitedly, leaping into the bed. Did you now? Logan asked with a pained laugh. I saw a battle too. It was really scary. But I knew you wouldn't let us lose, James said, his mother standing beside them smiling. Logan spent a long while there with his family. He had run himself so ragged that he hadn't seen them in over a week, and it had gotten to him. James made him promise to go see Earth as soon as possible, and his wife had made him to promise to never do anything so blatantly dangerous and suicidal, so help me God. Again. Later on, once he was able to get to his feet and communicate with the rest of the fleet, Logan learned what had happened after he had lost consciousness. Apparently, after the destruction of the Dreadnought, the enemy lines had fallen into disarray, which was only further compounded when the forces from Parker finally jumped into the system, cutting off the main source of retreat. What followed was nothing short of a decimation of the enemy forces, with less than a tenth of them making it out alive, jumping blindly to some unknown fate. They'd won, but at great cost. Many ships had been destroyed, and thousands of humans were dead. That evening, after much celebration and parties had been had on Earth and across the entire fleet, an intelligence officer approached Logan as he oversaw the control room of the Eden. "Sir, I've got something I think you'll want to know." "And that is?" he asked. "We've just received a transmission from the Alliance, sir. They want to talk." "Arrange a meeting, then," Logan said, smiling for the first time in a while as he gazed out the view screen at Earth. It was still scarred, but Johnson already had the terraforming projects underway. It wasn't over yet, but something told him the hardest part was behind them.